All right, back with you on the Newsfeed PM. Well, this has been one of our leading stories this afternoon. The Constitutional Court ruling that parental leave of 4 months and 10 days can now be shared between parents. This after the Gauteng High Court found that the existing laws unfairly discriminated against fathers by granting different leave entitlements in 2023. Currently, the law grants biological mothers 4 months of maternity leave, while fathers are entitled to 10 days. Joining us now, Labour lawyer Aslam Moolla to talk about the implications of this for the employer. Aslam, good to have you. Thank you very much for your time. Before we get to the implication for the employer, from a legal standpoint, what does it mean? How significant is this ruling that the courts are now saying fathers and mothers are entitled to be recognized equally as far as taking care of the children at birth?
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. I have to say, this is a historic moment. Finally, the law is evolving to show equal contributions by mothers and fathers. Previously, the law used to be based on outdated gender roles. The mother is the primary caregiver. This case, the highest court in the land has proven both parents can be equal caregivers, and this benefits children. So it's a major change in the law. Now, men and women, mothers and fathers, partners in same-sex relationships will be able to enjoy the benefits of raising a young child.
Yeah. Did the court factor in the possibility of abuse? You know, sometimes we say the laws in the Constitution, for example, around presidents and public officials were made with the assumption that those who get into power will behave well, right? This time around, when the law anticipated the behavior of those who will enjoy this ruling, did it anticipate that this could certainly be abused? And what protections did it put in place?
Understandably so. Anytime there's a right, there's also an obligation. So when this law had come into about, the original legal position was maternity leave was available only to females 4 months. Paternity leave was 10 days. The new law, in essence, is saying, or the Constitutional Court has said, this law is unconstitutional. It doesn't keep the basic conditions of Employment Act as it is now, does not keep in line with our Constitution and the values of our Constitution where people are treated equally. So, in effect, the court said, Parliament, you need to go back and change this law. We want men and women and partners in same-sex relationships, whether it's a biological child or an adopted child, both should be able to share 4 months and 10 days of leave. So like you said, what about an abuse situation? The court has already considered financial implications and how this would work. But the court said what's more important is the equality in this democracy. So is it, I guess what you're getting at is this likely to be challenged legally again? I don't think so, because the highest court in the land, which is the Constitutional Court, has already made a pronouncement on it. So from a legal perspective, it's almost finalized as law. The Parliament has to now change the current BCA, those provisions, to adapt to that. As for abuse, if an employee commits abuse on this, for example, deliberately lying about a child that has not been born, for example, then that might give rise to misconduct, which is then disciplinary process. But the focus today, I would say, is it's a historic time because now we have men and women being able to enjoy this benefit.
Yeah. The Justice Zugi Sachikri is saying there should be a requirement that the father who wants paternity leave qualifies as one who has assumed parental rights and responsibility. How important is that requirement, and what does it mean, and how easy would it be to, I suppose, furnish your employer with proof?
So this comes down to, there's different categories. So are you the biological father of the child? Is it a child that you have adopted, or are you in a relationship? I think what can be very complicated now that you raise this issue. What if you are married to someone and let's say that your partner had conceived the child with another man prior to your marriage or prior to your relationship, and now you are wanting to, when the child is born, you want to claim the paternity benefits. How will the law look at that? I think because this is such a new area of law, it's such a groundbreaking thing, the only way that it's going to be decided is if it comes before the CCMA or the Labour Court going forward. But it does raise interesting different scenarios. And that's, I guess, when you take a generic principle and you try and put it in an everyday situation, which has so many different scenarios, you're bound to have these different strains of what could happen here, what could happen there. But in short, the judges have said it's 4 months and 10 days. Ideally, by default, it should be 50-50. That means that the mother and the father should agree together to take the leave. I'm going to take the first 2 months or whatever the case is. The law still says after birth, the mother has to take 6 weeks. So after the birth of the child, the mother has to take 6 weeks. So there's no renegotiating that point. So ultimately, it's going to come down to practice. Also, how does it impact small businesses?
Yes.
What happens to a small business who has a smaller number of employees and they are reliant on these employees?
Yeah.
So this is where Parliament has to go back now, take this judgment and say, okay, how do we draw up more specific guidelines? Because right now, I can tell you in South Africa, there's a movement towards differentiating labor laws for larger organizations and labor laws for smaller organizations.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling, my instinct is telling me that Parliament is going to make that differentiation and say, if you're a smaller business, these are the factors. If you're a bigger business, these are the factors.
So you're saying in regulation now is where the finer details are going to lie. For example, the matter that you're raising, if the father and the mother agree that we are sharing this 50-50, what then needs to happen? Do they go to the various employers, say this is what we've agreed on? Is it just on the word of the father, on the word of the mother, or would there be legal documentation that would be required? How do you proceed about it?
No, definitely. That's a good question. You can't just, like any leave generally, you have to put in the supporting documentation. So if you want to take, for example, sick leave, you need a medical certificate. The only leave I can think of that you don't really need documents is annual leave, because that's a personal right that you have. You don't really need to go to the employer and say, I'm going for a vacation, here's my plane ticket and my hotel. And that's not necessary. But because this is linked to such an important event, I would probably presume important documents like maybe hospital admission or birth certificates, or if you adopted a child, the adoption agreement, etc., etc. So documents will have to be provided. There's no doubt about it. And furthermore, both parties, the mother and father, or if it's a same-sex couple, will have to approach their respective employers ahead of time, not the day before. Hey, listen, I have a child. I need to take 2 months off. It needs to be in a reasonable amount of time. But I guess all of these guidelines are going to come forward from Parliament. But no doubt about it, you're going to need some supporting documents.
Now, Aslam, what does this mean for employers, big or small? Do they begin already now to gear their HR systems towards this particular ruling, or do they wait for the parliamentary process? In other words, does this ruling automatically change everything, come into effect now, or must Parliament still do its work?
That's a good question for our viewers, and I'm glad you asked that. South Africa is a constitutional democracy. That means the Constitutional Court is the highest court in the land. And once that court makes a ruling, makes a decision, it's binding. So in effect, that law has come into being as it stands now. Right now, from tomorrow, the law has come into being, but the court recognizes that there is a time period for legislation to be drafted, employers need to adapt, etc. So Parliament has 36 months to go and make those changes to the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. However, That doesn't mean that if you are an employer, you have 36 months. No. From tomorrow is Saturday, but you get the point. Next week, when employers come back, they need to start relooking at their policies, relooking at their framework, having discussions with HR teams. If you're a small business owner, the law has changed. You need to adapt. That's how it works.
Yeah. You've already mentioned you anticipate that, of course, there will have to be a distinction drawn, financially speaking, between small businesses, larger businesses, and so on and so forth, as far as the finances and the operational impact is concerned. But do you foresee legal challenges, for example, around diverse family structures, such as, you've mentioned, adoptive parents? How about same-sex couples? How about surrogates?
I think that was part of the challenge that originally started the case, respectfully so. So what was happening is fathers were getting 10 days, mothers were getting 4 months, and this was affecting the career progression of females in the workplace because they'd be away for 4 months, and fathers, of course, couldn't really participate. If you look at the case itself, it's very interesting. It's because of the financial situation. The father in that situation wasn't able to take enough leave because his wife or his partner was running a small business and couldn't afford, from my understanding, to spend that crucial time with their infant child. So that's how the case came into being, and that's how the court ruled that actually mothers and fathers deserve equal protection and equal access here. So how does it relate financially? I don't think it's going to be legally challenged in the Constitutional Court again, simply because that financial issue has already been considered, and it's very rare for the Constitutional Court, for once it's decided something, for it to come all the way back again full circle. Very rarely does that happen. In terms of small businesses, this is where the real impact is going to be. So as a small business owner, you would now need to plan your operations because you can't dismiss an employee who takes this type of leave. This is a very special type of leave. Maternity leave, paternity leave, it is one now. And if you dismiss an employee for that, it can be considered automatically an unfair dismissal, which is a penalty of up to 24 months of that person's salary in the labor court. So these are the things for you to consider as a small business owner. It doesn't mean you should panic. It doesn't mean you should worry about this in a great sense. It means have communication. Talk to your staff members. Plan things out operationally. Guys, we've got 4 months, 10 days. Are you taking 2 months? Is the other partner taking 2 months? What are we going to do in the interim period, etc.? So communication is my advice.
Yeah. Now, Aslam, maybe not a legal question, but being a legal practitioner, you deal with human beings and attitudes in general. Does a law certainly work towards changing attitudes? I'll tell you why. Because the MEC for Social Development says, well, this will make fathers a little bit more present. Do you think having a law in place will shift behavior, redistribute caregiving responsibilities between parents? Just because the law is there, do you think fathers are now going to take responsibility?
You know, I wish that that would be the end result. Personally, you know, I believe that at the end of the day, a child needs both figures in their life, mother and father, and, you know, in a same-sex relationship as well. Both parents have their own contributions that they can make to a child. Whether it changes the mindset in South Africa, that is where perhaps the abuse you are talking about, where you might find a father taking the leave only because that leave is available, but not because he wants to play an active part in that child's life. That is an unfortunate side effect and an unfortunate consequence of this. But we must presume, I personally go through life saying, let's look on the positive, not the negative. By this law coming into effect, we can hope that this will allow fathers to play more active roles in their respective child's life, because as the African saying is, I stand to be corrected, but it takes a village to raise a child. And I think this is what the Constitutional Court is going towards. It's not just old roles given in previous times where the mother is the primary caregiver. Those times have changed. Today, the households are different, evolving needs of society. And that, for me, is the beauty of the law. It's not static. It changes, it adapts.
Aslam, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for your intervention and coming through for this very important conversation. Labour lawyer there, Aslam Moolla, following that ConCourt judgment.